My name's Ian Harris, and today I'm going to be talking about how translators localize your website and why you need to know how that happens in order to maximize your search marketing in other countries. My section, there's a lot in this kind of going global stuff, but I'm going to take it right back to the beginning, which is the piece where you localize your site into different languages, so you translate your site. So take it right back to that point, because I think it's important that if you're going global, you get that particular piece right and you actually understand what's going on. And certainly for your search marketing, you need to know this stuff. Okay, so I'm Ian Harris. I'm the CEO of Search Laboratory, and I actually, previous to Search Laboratory, like Tim, I worked in the translation industry. So we used to translate sites into different languages. So I wasn't actually a linguist, but I was a techie in that industry. So integrating with content management systems to get words out, to translate, and then get back in different languages, different character sets, all of that stuff. Okay, so we've now been in Search Laboratory for the last 10 years doing international search. So this is what I'm going to be going through today. How translators actually work, so how do they actually do their day-to-day job, and why you need to know that. So why is this critical? This event is about search, so why do you need to know that for search? And then options for when you actually do localize your website that you've got, and then hidden pitfalls and things as we go along. So the first thing that I'm going to do is just show you my web page. So we're getting straight into code already. Just lock the doors so no one can escape this bit. So what I did was I created a web page, and that's it. So this is the code on the left for my web page on the right. So it's a fairly simple page. It just displays welcome to my web page, and it's got the word blue in blue that I've put on the bottom of that. And the reason I've done this is to just demonstrate how a translator would then go about translating this particular page. So the code on the left is the bit that they need to translate, but you can see the bits that show on the screen, that's actually the part that they need to translate. So if you look at the code on the left and you say, right, okay, of that, what do I need to translate as a translator? Well, the first bit, can you see that highlighted? They obviously need to translate welcome to my web page, because that needs to go into French or German or whatever it is. So that's fairly easy. And that sits within what we call an H1 tag. So that's a header, and that's the H1 is the thing that makes it big and bold. Okay, so it's all fairly simple stuff. Don't translate the H1, but do translate welcome to my web page. And then the other thing that you definitely need to translate is that blue there, because that shows on the screen. So they need to translate that, but they mustn't translate font color equals blue, because that's the thing that makes it blue. So if they translate the blue that is in the brackets, then it won't be blue anymore, it'll break. So they translate that bit. So there's a fairly simple rule there: translate everything that's not in the angled brackets. And then that rule doesn't quite hold, because we've got two pieces of text at the top. One is called the page title, and one is the page description that isn't in that is actually within angled brackets. So then an attribute, so they're in quotes within an angled bracket. So they do need to translate that. But they shouldn't be translating everything that's an attribute, because the font color equals blue is also a quoted attribute within angled brackets. So even with this very, very simple page, it's not absolutely straightforward what should be translated and what shouldn't be translated. And the translators have to do this on, imagine you're looking at the code on your web pages, it's a lot more complex than this. There's stuff inside JavaScript, there's all sorts of stuff going on. So it's hard enough doing that. And then the next thing is I change my page, which is what happens with web pages. You change them all the time. So I reissue that code, and that's a new web page. That is different to the first one. So I don't know if you can spot what's different there, but it's actually the description tag has changed from my web page to Ian's web page. So I've made a change there. So that then goes back off to the translator, and they've got to do the same thing again. So they've either got to retranslate the whole thing, picking everything that should be translated, hiding everything that shouldn't be translated, or they've got to try and spot bits that they've already translated from the bits that they haven't translated, and kind of use their old file. So it's quite complex stuff. And you imagine how fast your web pages change. They've got to do all this stuff. Now, fortunately, they have tools that help them. So the first bit is they're called computer-aided translation tools. And the one thing that they do is they hide the code. So they expose the stuff that should be translated and hide the stuff that shouldn't be translated. And this is the sort of thing that they'd see. So you can see at the top there's a box that I would type in that is a translation of the stuff that's on the right. Okay? So, and all the code is protected. So all that font color equals blue, all of that stuff is protected from the translator. So it makes it really, really easy for them. So protecting the code is one thing, but what about those changes, those ongoing changes? Well, the other thing that these tools do is that everything that the translator translates, every single sentence pair that you see on there goes into what is called a translation memory. So when you use a translation company or use a translator that uses these tools, which you absolutely must do, by the way, if they're not using these, you need to make sure that they are. Every single sentence pair that they've translated before goes into a memory. And the great thing about this is, let's say this is my web page. So I've got a web page on the left, which is this is Skyscanner. That goes off to the translator. As they're translating those sentence pairs, all of that stuff, and they're creating the final page, all of that stuff, all of those sentence pairs are going into a memory, which is a database that sits with either the translator or the translation company, and that fills up with all those sentence pairs. So when we change that page, so I've added "we do some nice holidays" on that page, the translator sees this. They see stuff that they've already translated, which is pre-translated for them, and then they get a box that says, "Never seen this before, can you fill this piece in, please?" They can still amend the stuff that they've translated before in case it's out of context, but they don't have to spot the new bits, they don't have to worry about the code, they just translate the bits that are new. Okay? Does that make sense? That's whistle-stop translation memory. The benefits of this, and the reason why you absolutely must be doing this and you must be engaging with a company that does this properly or translators that do this properly, is there's a major cost benefit. So on web pages, on websites, there's lots and lots of repeated text. You do not want to be paying for that to be translated over and over again. When you get changes to your site, you don't want the translators faffing with what they've done before and what they haven't done before. You don't want to be paying for all that to happen. And then naturally you get consistency, because if you've translated it once, you've checked it, that's okay, you'll always use that terminology in future. Okay, so it's really, really good system. It's faster, and you get these filters. The translators are not going to break your website, whether it's XML, whether it's HTML, whichever version. The translation tools will protect all that stuff for you. So it's really, really important that you do this. But we're talking about search. So why do we care about any of this stuff that the translators are doing? Are we bothered at all? Well, we absolutely should be. So to show you why you should be, I'm just going to walk you through that translation process using the memory, and then I'm going to okay, so follow this carefully. There'll be a test at the end. On the left, I've got my web page, which says, "Welcome to my website. It sells mountain bikes, road bikes, cycling helmets." And I've had that translated into French. And on the right-hand side is a good translation of that page. So I've passed that off to a translation company. They've translated it into French, and you can see the little database at the bottom which sits at the translation company and has the memory in it. And if you can read it, I've done it a bit small, but there's every sentence pair there. Every sentence pair is in the memory. Okay, so it's fairly simple stuff. And then what invariably happens is you change your page. So instead of saying "it sells," we found that actually it converts better if we say "it has a huge range of." Okay, but the French still says "it sells." So what happens is that is run against the memory. We send the file off the left-hand side. That file goes off to the translation company, and this sort of thing displays to them, which is, "I've seen all these other bits before. please type in the new bit. So we type in the new bit, and then the new sentence pair goes in the memory. It doesn't replace the old one. The new sentence pair simply goes in the memory. And then we've got a good page. We can launch that page and everything's good. So that's how the translation piece works. I'm now going to do exactly the same thing again. I'm going to go back to step 1 and I'm going to SEO it. Okay? So I've translated the page and I've got this good page in French on the right hand side. And then I send it off to a quality SEO company that can work in French. And the French people at the SEO company say, hang on a minute, looking at the search volumes, Vélo de route, which is a good translation, is actually not as good as Vélo de course. So it's a road bike, this. And that is actually more search volume. It's actually a better term to use if we're trying to attract visitors to the website. So it's a better term. Same bike, but better term. Also, I am better dropping the de in Vélo. There's a lot more search volume if I do that. Okay? So we send that off to the SEO company and they make the change in the French page. This is invariably what happens, and it's probably happening at many of your companies now. So the change is made to the French version of the website. Okay? All good? And then that change happens again. I need to start this again. I'll go back to the beginning. And then that change happens. It has a huge range of, and of course, we've still got the old new Vendon in the French page. Okay? We send that off to the translation company. The translation company matches it against the memory, and it says, right, of all these English sentences, I've seen most of them before, apart from that one that's new, and it translates them from the memory. So the issue that you've got is it undoes all of that SEO work. So through the memory, we send it off to the translation company. Translation company says, seen all that before, has no knowledge of the SEO work that's been going on, and it undoes all of the changes. So time and time again, and we get this over and over again with clients, if the SEO process is not integrated with the translation process, then all your SEO changes continuously get undone, and you're paying your SEO company over and over again to basically re-optimize your French pages, every other language. So it's very, very important that, one, you make sure that your SEO vendor knows about this stuff, okay? Or else you're not going to maximize your potential in other markets, because you're going to undo those pages and you will not even know that it's happened. You'll just see search volume drop off. The SEO changes must populate the translation memory. So when you make those changes, those SEO changes after the translation's happened, you've got to get those back into the memory. I'm not going to go into the different ways of doing that, because there's different memory systems. Some are online, some are offline, but you've got to make sure they go back in. If you work with a company like us, or a translation company that knows this stuff, then we can work together and get those changes back into the memory. And it's not hard, it's just knowing it and doing it. So building a robust workflow. You don't want to be bothered with any of this stuff. You don't want ever to think about any of this stuff, or did that change make it back in? It mustn't be manual. This must all be automatic, and it's fairly easy to do. Okay, did that make sense on the translation memory front? It's very, very important that if you're in SEO and you're doing multilingual stuff, make friends with the people that are doing translation in your company if it's not you. Understand that, get a meeting with them and see how the workflow works, and then make sure your SEO changes are making it back into that memory. Otherwise, you're going to continuously be chasing your tail. Okay, so I was just going to look at different localization options. So you've got a website and you need to put it into different languages, and there's different systems and there's different mechanisms that will enable you to do this. So first of all, I've got a website. So this is typically how a website is built. It's got generally a database which has got all your products in it. generally a lot of the words are in the database. And then you've got some business logic. So that's the code behind your web page, behind your website. So that's got things like your payment options and your voucher code system, all that if then do this type code is in there. And then that displays the web pages that show to users. So this is the sort of page that would then be generated. So this is the thank you page from your website. And you can see that says thank you for your order of 12 widgets with a discount code of 0123. The price will be £24 plus £2 postage to Northern Ireland. So I've put a deliberately complex sentence in there that's made up of different bits that are coming out of different areas of that sort of business logic flow and database. It's quite complex stuff when you put it all together. Imagine translating that. So in order to do that, I've put 3 options down. There's probably more than this, but I've put the 3 main options. Option 1 that you've got is you entirely replicate that whole system in different languages. So you get yourself a server and you replicate the entire thing in different languages. And therefore you can give the entire thing to a translation company, the database, the business logic, everything, and get it translated. And it's actually a really kind of easy way of doing this whole process. So you translate the entire thing, and it's fairly easy, and it means that also that the sites can be different. So once you've translated, because it's on a different server, it's a different site, different business logic, that can then live its own life. The French site can have different business logic. It can have different payment options. It can have a different feature product on the homepage. It's very easy for it to live its own life. They can also be hosted locally on a local IP, which is another ranking factor. It's not as big as it used to be, but it is a ranking factor. The problem with it is that the business logic is replicated 3 times, and the business logic is a living, breathing thing. You're changing things all the time on your website, and to keep 2 websites in step with each other is an absolute nightmare. And when you've got 5 websites and they're in different character sets and different things, it's really, really hard to keep them up to date. So it's fairly easy, but it's very, very difficult to keep in step. Second option is integrate. So this is probably the hardest option, but I think this is the best option. So this is where what you do is you actually internationalize the business logic of your website. Big step this. So this is the whole system behind your website becoming multilingual, having the language selector built in, being able to select languages and pull languages out of a multilingual database. Big job this, but the great thing about it is you can then simply integrate your database with a translation company and then forget about the whole thing. One set of business logic. So if you change your voucher code system or if you change anything, your developers only have to do it once. Or indeed, if there's something slightly different, they can put those switches within the business logic of the site. So single deployment, which everybody loves. And then the first translation is difficult because you've got to internationalize the code. But the second translation and subsequent translations are really, really easy. You just flick a switch and everything goes off to the translators and it comes back and it's deployed. So really, really, really easy to do. And you can create an automated translation workflow, so you can forget about it. So you just keep your English pages up to date and it automatically posts off for translation to the translation company. So really, really good system, this. The third one that I just want to talk about is one that's kind of come up more recently, and it's called a proxy-based system. So what this is and some of you might do this, and I know ASOS actually launched internationally using a proxy-based system. So this is the way that they did it. So what happens is you have your website, and it's got all its business logic, it's got its web pages, and then you engage with a company that's got a proxy-based system. So this is a technology piece, and what that does is it goes off to your website and it scrapes all the pages. It spiders the site a bit like Google would, and it scrapes all the pages and extracts all the translatable content off those pages. So it's a clever system, spiders it, scrapes it, and then sends that off for translation. Uses a memory, uses all of that stuff, uses a human translator. So this is not a machine translation. It's still a good translation, but the scraping is all automated. It means you don't have to internationalize the whole site. You don't have to internationalize the database. Really, really easy. And then when people come to the website, so if you've got yourwebsite.fr, they actually link, that IP address actually points at the proxy system. So it points at this company that serves this content. And what that does, it comes to the French site, it says, I want this page. It goes off to your website, grabs the English version of that page, marries it, scrapes all the content out, marries it with the stuff that's already translated because it's already scraped this page, and launches that page with all the translations that it knows about. So it's a really clever, easy to deploy system. So very, very easy and fast to deploy. So really, really good. If you want to dip your toe in a new market, it's really easy. And it's excellent for static websites. So if you've got a website that doesn't change that much, then it's not a bad system to use. Where it tends to fall over, and where everything falls over that's easy, is that when you've got dynamic content, it becomes a lot more difficult, because how is it going to scrape something unless it's seen it? So if you've got business logic switches in there, if this, then do that. If the user is from here and has this, then, and they've got a voucher code, then display this to them. How can it scrape that content? So you have to help it. There's different things that you need to do to make it work, and then you've got different currencies and you've got different payment options. So it sounds easy, but there's always something hard that you need to do. But it's not a bad sort of, first, like I say, dip your toe in the water. It's you can't kind of use this and do A/B testing. So if it's dynamic content in any way, you're always going to struggle with a proxy-based system. Also, if you want to deploy different things to different sites, so it's in Australia, we're just featuring the duffel coats over here, but that's not relevant for the Australian market. You've got an absolute mirror of the site, but in different languages. Okay, so just to summarize that lot, localization is actually pretty difficult. The proxy is quite an easy first step to maybe test the market, but do go into it with your eyes open. You are going to hit some fairly big blockers, if you go down the easy routes. Choose your translation company wisely. So choose a translation company that understands the complexities of taking an e-commerce deployment overseas. There's more to it than you think. It's not just like translating a Word document. Estimate the tech time required. So get your tech people to estimate the time required for taking your site internationally, and double it. There's always things that come out of the woodwork that require a whole restructure of your database, or it's actually hard stuff. This we in my previous job we did this, and we helped people through this process, and it is there's always stuff, that reports and different things that need to be internationalized that you didn't quite estimate up front. Just a final point on this partial translation. We always get asked this question. All this is really, really hard. So what about, just to test a market, why don't we just localize some PPC, do some keywords? Let's create a page on the site that says, welcome to our site. We realize we don't speak your language, but subsequently you're going to face English pages. So we put that in Japanese or whatever, and we make the apology, and then we force them into an English process, and then they go through that process. That absolutely never works. And you may have had some orders from Germany, or you may have had some orders from, Scandinavia, and so you think that people are going to battle through that process because they have done in the past. Well, if they have done that in the past, they may have come through social media, they may have had the site recommended to them, so they're entering that process knowing that it's English, but search is a very, very different thing. If people search in their language, if the site is not displayed in their language, your conversion rate will not support the bid price or the SEO that you need to do to get up there. Okay, you will not be able to compete in that market. Just in case you're thinking of that, don't do it. It's never worked. Localization is not just about getting the translation done. There's a lot more involved than that I'm not going to go into. There's payment options, images, legal, the actual use of the language, customer service. You know, what sort of customer service do you need to deploy in language? Logistics. Okay, so a lot of transactions that are done in Russia and also the Middle East are cash on delivery. So that's a whole new, you know, how does that work? That's a whole new concept. So we're going to touch on, I'm not going to go into any more detail on those, but we're going to touch on those as we go through some of those. So it's not all just about the translation piece. So finally, in summary for my bit, engage with a specialist localization company. Do not get someone who knows a bit of French or a French intern to translate your website. It sounds like a cheap option, but they won't use a memory. They won't know how to protect the code. You'll get in a mess. And once you're in a mess, it's very, very difficult to recover from it. It is much cheaper to pay a good translation company to do this. We're not a translation company, by the way, so I'm not saying, you know, you need to use us for this, but engage with a good translation company that uses these tools and translation memory. Very, very important. Integrate your SEO with that translation process. It doesn't matter if you've translated already and then you're thinking about SEO, or that you've started it already, but integrate it with the translation process. Choose the localization process carefully, so Proxy or Replicate the site, and make sure your SEO company gets it. Don't engage with an SEO company that says, "Oh yeah, we've done a bit of international." They need to know this stuff in detail. They need to be able to sit down with the translation company and start mapping out some of these workflows that are not going to cause you to start re-translating or re-SEOing once the SEO gets broken after the translation process. So you need a company that can do that for you. And that is it from me.